My name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest Mindell Dubansky. Mindell is a book conservator, librarian, author, and artist. She also serves as the Museum Librarian for Preservation at the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Thomas J. Watson Library. She's here today to inform us about the fascinating exhibition she recently curated entitled The Best Kept Secret, 200 Years of Blooks, which will be on display at the Center for Book Arts in New York until May 10th. For those of you not familiar with the term, books are objects that resemble books in their shape, but are not actually books in the traditional sense. During the program, we'll learn about the history and development of books, why and how the exhibition came about. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour, and in the process, come to better understand and appreciate the wide range of books that are on display, and why books further substantiate our enduring fascination with the book form, even in non-traditional ways. Welcome, Mindell. So delighted you're able to be here.
Thank you, Jay. It's really fun. Thank you for inviting me.
It's speaking of fun, it's been wonderful for me to begin to learn about books, read about some of your work with them, view a number of forms. I'm eager to find out more and have you inform viewers. But before we jump right to that, I think it would be of interest if you just briefly share maybe a little bit more about your background, professional interest, perhaps current position.
Yeah, well, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but in terms of my interest in books, well, I was a student at Carnegie Mellon and I majored in printmaking and drawing. So I was always an artist and I always loved 19th century printing techniques like lithography, wood engraving, and those were my two woodcut, of course. So that's what I studied. But, in my junior year abroad, I did go to England, to Exeter, and I went to the Exeter College of Art, and there I was really exposed for the first time to antiquarian books because they were everywhere, and,
Mm.
just the visual just I couldn't believe it that you could have books like that old,
Mm.
or that beautiful for so little money, and there was and there was so much in each book to enjoy, to appreciate. They were full of wood engravings, just everything, the level of detail of descriptions. I love them, and I bought some books, and, when I graduated college, because there was nowhere to study bookbinding at that time, there was a British book restorer in the Hunt Library at Carnegie Mellon, and she taught bookbinding classes, and that was it, and like every other bookbinder on the planet, I got shot with Cupid's arrow. It was very instant. It was like, "Well, this is it. This is what I wanna be." So that's when I came to New York, and oddly enough, I came to New York to go to the Center for Book Arts, which was at that time in its original location on Bleecker Street, and I took all my little books from my class, and I just showed up, and as I do, because I imagined it, I believed it to be true. That's the problem issue that I have. It's kinda good for manifestation because I can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, but I showed up, and I imagined that I was the next apprentice, and I just told them, like, "I'm here, where's my table? Ready to learn to be a bookbinder," and they tried kicking me out, but I wouldn't go, and, the rest was history. I stayed there for 4 years, and, you want me to go into this much detail? I don't know,
Now, we're going to move on, and maybe let's just jump right into the topic of books. How did
yeah,
you become
okay,
fascinated with this?
so well, all book people, when I say that, would be bookbinders, book collectors, librarians, have book-shaped objects. People give them to them as gifts, they find them, they were novelties, and I knew that people considered them novelties, but I also knew always inherently, that the physical book, aside from the text, had its own story, its own meaning, and its own relationship with the transmitting of information and the transformation of humans. So I didn't know how to explain that or what to think of it. And I had an epiphanal experience. I always thought about it because I always wondered what happened to me. Like, how did that happen to me? Like, how did one day I just decide to devote my entire life of it to bookbinding and fixing books? And like 40 years later, I'm still doing the same thing. It's still the
Mm.
same, so what is that? What is that?
Wow.
What happened? So in a way, it was somewhat autobiographical. I was trying to understand myself and and how my relationship to this object, and to try to take the look at and it was kind of unfashionable, or scholars are never going to tell you to look at the book aside from the text. Like, that would be bookbinding always gets left out. Like, if you look at the
Mm. Mm.
it gets out of a lot left out of a lot of things, because book bindings aren't necessarily always the original to the book, so bibliographers are suspect of it. There's a lot of things in the library world that makes people leave bookbinding out. And even when they talked about bookbindings, they would talk about the decoration and nothing else about the object, like the structure. So
Mhm.
anyway, I found this little coal book, an anthracite book from the 1870s in a flea market, and it was obvious to me that it was a mourning object. And it was a prayer book, because it had the
Mhm.
slightest little attributes of a prayer book: beveled edges, the suggestion of a four-edge clasp, and it had the birth date and the death date of this young man who died at 21.
Mm.
And it fit into the palm of my hand, and it transformed me to his graveside, and I was sure I saw how he died in the mine. I imagined this entire scenario where his friend, who was a coal miner, made this book and gave it to his wife. It was this, like, weird, out-of-body experience, but it impressed me immediately that this is proof that there's nothing kitschy or silly about book-shaped objects, and
Mm.
also that people had been making them at least since the 1870s.
Mm.
So at that moment, and it synchronized with kind of like when the mid-90s, when eBay came in for the first time. Although I had looked for books earlier, I said, "I've got to find more of these, I need to understand the scope of this subject." So I started collecting and researching. I didn't have to own everything. I just had to find out about it. But if I saw them, I bought them. But with the internet, I, for the first time, was able to find them, because, like, where you could go into a
Yeah.
million antique shops and never find one. So, so that really made me see, this is my moment to really build a collection, define the subject, understand the scope, and interpret it to others. And then it took me 30 years, even more, about 30 years, before I was ready, and because of my research and my collection or others' collections that I knew about, to really present my subject to the public, which I did in 2016 at the Grolier Club. And that was my first publication also on the subject, which in itself is a book, and it looks like this.
Oh, fabulous,
And so
fabulous.
I
And
learned
then
anyway, go ahead.
bringing us up to present day, that was very informative and helpful for background. How did the Best Kept Secret exhibition come about?
Okay, well, that's also so all along I've been doing, researching, writing, talking, collecting. This year, in 1 year, I did 3 exhibitions, and I did
Wow.
it. It seems like every single project I've ever done, whether it was really intentional or not, is about legacy. And I was motivated by the series of exhibitions, because I had always a couple and another person. So I had friends all this time that I've been collecting, who were my friends that I could talk with and be with. And they both ran into trouble this year, and there were deaths, there were sad things. So I pivoted, and I said, they're still around. I'm going to put everything I've got into
Mm.
sharing, working, making their collections public, showing the appreciation that I have for the fact they made these collections, and tying it in general with my interest in doing this, which is a long-term interest I've always had, which is sort of, I call it, just for myself, the Blook Institute, which is like a series of activities that I've always engaged in to promote the subject. So, so the Best Kept Secret is the last of the series of exhibitions. One was at the San Francisco Center for the Book, and it was Ian Burke's collection of American carved stone books. One was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and It was of the collection of Lynn and Bruce Heckman antiquarian book objects, which they gave as a gift to the museum. And this exhibition, The Best Kept Secret, is really about me, although I included everyone. I included the
Mm.
Heckman gifts, some of the books from the Heckman gift to the Met, some of Lynn Heckman before she died in last October was generously lent me long term her entire collection as long as I'm using it, which is over 900 objects. And so
Wow.
some of those are included here. And then my own collection. But what's so special about this exhibition to me, all my other exhibitions were kind of about introducing the public to the subject. Like this is the kind they made toys, they made games, and
Mhm.
they made Bible boxes. But this exhibition allowed me to really think much more deeply because I've already done that. And I went back to the people because it's all about the people. This show is about people for me. It's about the collectors that helped to build these collections. It's about the individuals that decided to make these objects and their
Mhm.
relationship to books. Why? The why of how, and also the people who inspired the books, the people who received these objects as gifts, because so many of these objects, whether they're unique, like folk art objects, unique one of a kind objects, or whether they're manufactured, which many of them are, they're all in a way like love gifts or gifts.
Mm.
Sometimes
Nice,
they're
nice.
practical. So I started thinking a lot more about the context of these objects and the people who lived with them and made them.
For those who haven't had the chance to visit yet, before we look at some wonderful examples, would you please provide an overview of how things are laid out, the different
Yeah.
areas,
Yeah.
themes?
So the Center for Book Arts Gallery, which is the Center for Book Arts is a wonderful organization that has teaches courses in handbook binding and printing. And in the center, when you walk in, this gallery is in the center of the facility. What you're seeing through that window is the print shop, and on the other
Mm.
side, like where the viewer would be, is a bindery. So it's right smack in the middle of bookmaking world, and it's a lovely little envelope. And the director, first thing I did was ask her how many objects would fit into this gallery comfortably, and and did she have any preference because it's Center for Book Arts has never shown had an exhibition like this of historic book objects. And she asked me, she really wanted it to tie into book arts, contemporary book arts, and thinking about the book as art. And so I decided, so it was like, 70, 75 objects. So I decided to make 6 themes and put 12 objects in each theme. And that's what you're seeing on the wall are the description of the themes. And I arranged, so the objects that I selected for the broadest scope within each theme to share the broadest scope I could do in 12 objects. Um,
Well, let's take advantage of our time and
okay,
have you inform us about some of the ones you selected
sure.
to share with us.
Because the show was at the Center for Book Arts, I had 2 book book repair kits, which I put outside of the show, outside of the main part of the show under the introductory panel. And this one is The Care and Feeding of Books from 1947. It's American. I don't know who made it, but I did find an advertisement from an old, I think New York Times. Yeah, 1947. Um, which described that this one that I own is the regular binding, the edition binding, but there was another one that was a deluxe binding that was full pigskin, which I've
Mhm.
never seen. So this is where finding advertisements or patents comes in handy. This is standard. Like when I look at this, I think this is what people of my generation would define as a real book. It's just got a look,
Sure.
it's got gold. It just looks like a work of literature or history that you would see in a very traditional library, and it has marbled paper and it has, I mean, the things in these kits you would never, I mean, it makes you cringe as a conservator, but that's what you're looking at here. And
Sure.
of course many of these books have pun titles that are puns, or gags or jokes or just silly.
Yeah, yeah.
This in
And
this
we're going to see some coming up. We're going to go into the
Yeah.
first of the categories,
First,
containment and concealment.
right, I would say, like I mean, a lot of these objects could have fit into a lot of categories, but, if you had to pick, like, the main category, the main subject that encompasses most books, it would be containment and concealment, because most books, unless they're solid, like made out of a solid
Mm,
material, are
sure.
meant to hold something, sometimes something specific or not. So what you're seeing here, I mean, I just think this is a quintessential book because, it was
Fabulous.
made for the tourist trade and probably in France, and in the around and what you're seeing on the left here is the only trade catalog, full, like, complete trade catalog, it's only 4 pages, that I have ever found just for books. And it's from a fancy, gift shop in Paris, and it's showing you, 2 versions of this object, one where the arrow is and the one just below it, but it's also
Mm,
showing you a phonograph, a radio, all kinds of, yeah, yeah, I didn't put both sides in, but there's all kinds of things there. And then this is one of the areas that I just always that I try not to collect much in, which is altered books. So these objects are both cordial sets like this were made in France from old sets of 18th century books, and sometimes they were made just, from scratch out of other materials, they never were books, but here this one was made, from books, and this was very a common tourist, special gift item from the 19 this ni I think it's 1920s. Um,
that is, yeah, just a wonderful example. And this next category, we're going to hear about learning and enlightenment.
Learning and so there's a lot of course, the book form lends itself to, writing desks or, faux encyclopedias of something or how-tos, like faux how-tos, and there's a lot of things like that, sewing kits that have names like of common how-to books. But this is really a wonderful book lanterns were I started seeing book lanterns patented from different countries starting in the 18 um, 60s, I believe, and, they had different variants. This one, Gutenberg La Lumière Fut, Let There Be Light, is bound in actual bookbinding materials. The case was probably made by a bookbinder, but it's a pocket lantern for holding a candle.
Oh,
Other
wonderful.
variants of this, so it would have been a writing desk in a home. Other variants of the lantern actually are brass, and I have another one that actually have a handle on the spine, and the patent I found from it from 1861 says that it would be very useful for policemen and sailors. So
That is,
I'm imagining, patrolmen moving around town holding their book, and when they're not using it, it fits right into their pocket.
that is great. That is great. How about a few words on love and friendship, please?
Love. Oh, love is a wonderful subject, and friendship. So many of the stone books are about love and friendship. I mean, if you get a love book that's made out of a rock, it really means something, right? It's going to be forever. So in that case, it's symbolic. In this case, this particular, this is a friendship album. It's called an album amacorum, and they were very popular in Europe, specifically in Germany from in the 18th and 19th century, and this particular one, it's cards and engravings inside of this little book box, and the book box has a very, very formal bookbinding is made to look like a very traditional formal bookbinding style, which is called a cameo binding. And you can kind of see that it has that cat raised cameo classical image. It's hard to see in this picture, and it's gold tooled. And it has, so it's something that someone would take to when they were traveling around, either as a tourist or in the summer, or if they went to college and they would collect these little notes and cards and locks of hair and paintings and drawings in their friendship book. And so this is really the beginning of what I don't know if it still exists today, but in my generation as a kid, we all had autograph books, and
Sure.
this is in the tradition of an autograph book.
Most definitely. Most
The
definitely.
object book comes from that. Again, in remembrance of commemoration, I mean, most of the objects in the case that I have, I just like these pictures, but most of the other objects in this case, in this section of the exhibition are about war, remembering particular battles, particular places where battles occurred or there were war hospitals. Also, mourning objects, very often there'll be a book commemorating the death of someone. This particular one is I chose to share with you, commemorates someone's trip on the Grand Tour in Europe in the 19th century. And
Wow.
it's a very common book object. It's called Liberati Imprante. This was one volume from something that would have been an encyclopedia. It would have had many, many volumes. I only have this one, but it's like volume 13 or 17 or something like that. So it
Ooh,
gives you an indication. These are big sets. And what they're including is plaster casts of, um, again, classical art that the traveler could purchase and take home with them to study and to remember their trip. And each cover opens, and on each cover, on the inside of each cover, is a contents list.
terrific. Wow, fabulous.
This
And
one
now
it is Italian.
mm, just to see the diversity, we're into pastimes and amusements.
Yeah, I'm showing you pictures of kind of a lot of older ones, but they're also the show goes up to the 1960s, actually to 2000 probably. Um, so, well, this is the one for a long time. This was the oldest one I had and the most valuable one I had, and it's a tea caddy. At least the leather looks like it might have come from bindings, but the books are solid. They're made out of paper or wood. And here it is open. And if you can see on that first book under the opening, it has like a break in it. That is a panel. One of those spines comes out, and that's where the lock is. You could lock
Ah,
it because your tea was so valuable. You didn't want anybody going in there and stealing any. But this is an entertainment center, circa, mid 18th century. And because it has the paper theater, it has so you could have a little play and you could have your tea and really have a nice afternoon with your friends.
fabulous. Wonderful. And last category, we're going to talk about religion and faith.
Yes. So, oh my, there's so many objects so many book objects that emulate Bibles and prayer books and the Book of Life. And Uh, this is one that surprised me that I didn't know existed until I found it by accident one day, and it's a bookshelf of little wooden books with printed paper covers that tell you a little bit about the books of the 66 books of the Bible.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's patented, and I was able to find the patent, as you can see, and it showed me that my version of it is incomplete because originally it had a book-shaped slipcase, and the title of it, and you can see on the lower part of the spine of the in the patent, is called the Book of Books. And while this is a manufactured one, I've seen others, and I have one other that were handmade, obviously by parents or maybe a Sunday school teacher. Might not have had the money to buy something like this or the smaller ones, but did make these teaching tools for their children. It wasn't enough just to have a list or a picture. They really wanted a bookshelf with books that children could hold. And we know that handling the book helps your mnemonics. I mean, it helps you remember what's in it. I don't know if I was giving the example the other day to my tour that it's like with handwriting. When I used to take notes, handwritten
Mm.
notes in class, I could later, at the time of the test, visualize my page of notes. And I think it's because I wrote it, like it came through my body, whereas I can't do that on the computer. I can't picture a page on the computer that I've seen and read it. So this kind of reminds me of that aspect of the physical book, that the touch of it, having it in your hands, experiencing it somehow makes it absorb in a very strong way.
Most definitely, most definitely. What do you hope visitors come away with after enjoying the exhibition?
Um, I put a lot of energy into my labels and writing, so I think they will all, and I have a catalog. This is the little catalog. I don't know if you can see it, but
Yes,
so they're going to learn something about a subject that they think they probably already know a lot about books, right? They're going to be surprised because if you love books and you don't know about the history of books, I think it's going to really enrich perspective and your feelings about books. And it's going to excite, I know it'll excite everyone. They're sort of irresistible objects because there's so many layered meanings to the objects and there's so much interest in the physicality of the objects. So I think they're going to absorb that. And if they really want to know more about it, if they read everything, they're really going to learn about it. I know I've had people come to the exhibition that have written me, people who are really want to get involved in the book arts, but are grappling with like, what's their perspective? How do they enter it? And this has helped them. I've had people write me to tell me that there's one, like the gag books or the certain parts of the certain of these objects really communicated to them and they want to start collecting or at least have one or two. This is a subject that's just so pleasurable to share with others. It's a very joyous and meaningful subject. So the average visitor, that's what I want them to get. But my greater goal, I have a two-part mission, which is I really am trying to create an academic subject in this area that never
Mm.
existed. I think these three exhibitions helped a long way to cement just to create that, although it hasn't been created yet because there isn't a major study collection somewhere and I need to find a home eventually for these collections or part of these collections so that students can actually go somewhere and see them all and handle them. So that's my biggest goal, the legacy that I want to leave with this subject. But also, as a bookbinder, the variety of interesting structures that these objects have are all going to be of interest to people who make artist books or who just want
Mm.
to make things because there's just great contraptions and they're really fun to make. So I want people to have that physical hands-on joy of being inspired to make their own book, make new books. So that's kind of like in a nutshell, my goal with this.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, Mindell, unfortunately, we've run out of time for the program. It's been fascinating hearing about your history with books, the incredible collection you've assembled, and just introducing most of us for the first time here to this wonderful book form. And as you say, just another way to appreciate that type of form that many of us do every day, especially in this digital technological age. There's something about the actual book that is so appealing and enduring. So thank you for continuing to promote that.
Yeah, and I would encourage anybody who wants to know more, who's interested, who wants to buy one of the books that I've written, or just if you happen to be, really are a scholar in this area that should contact me. And my email is very straightforward. It's my whole name, Mindell Dubansky at gmail.com.
Great. We'll put that in the credits for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, because I like to keep the conversation going and I'm very accessible and I really want to hear people's feelings and responses to the objects. And for me, that's why I put it out there too, is because I really want to have the dialogue about these objects. I want to hear how other people feel about books. Everybody I meet, I ask them like, so what do books mean to you? And sometimes they can answer me and sometimes they can't. But if you want to ever talk about it, Jay, you should call me up.
Thank you.
I
Thank
want to
you
hear
for
what
the
you think.
invitation. Thank you. And really, thanks so much for your time.
My
And
pleasure.
also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.